A handsome actor offers a ride to a lost farm girl in his sports car. The secret she reveals during the drive leaves him speechless. Hello and welcome to 80s Love Stories, where I, your favorite narrator, Christopher, bring you an exciting love story straight from the unforgettable 1980s. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. The setting sun painted the Nebraska cornfields in hues of amber and gold as Alice clutched her worn duffel bag, thumb extended hopefully along Route 30. Her weathered boots, scuffed from miles of walking, kicked up small clouds of dust with each shuffling step. The warm summer breeze carried the scent of freshly cut hay and distant rain. A sleek red Corvette thundered past, then suddenly slowed, brake lights flashing bright against the dimming sky. Alice's heart skipped. After hours of unsuccessful hitchhiking, finally a chance at a ride. The car reversed smoothly, coming to stop beside her. The driver's window hummed down, revealing a handsome face that Alice instantly recognized from dozens of movie posters and magazine covers. Henry Morrison, Hollywood's current heartthrob, flashed his signature smile. "Looks like you could use a lift," he said, his voice carrying that same charming lilt that had won him roles in several blockbuster films. "Where you headed?" Alice hesitated, her fingers tightening around her bag strap. Every warning her father had given her about accepting rides from strangers echoed in her mind, but she was tired, and the next town was still miles away. "Just trying to get to Grand Island," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her recognition of who he was. "My truck broke down a few miles back." Henry reached across to unlock the passenger door. "Hop in. I'm headed that way myself." The leather seat creaked as Alice slid in, carefully placing her bag at her feet. The car's interior smelled of expensive cologne and new leather. A journey cassette played softly on the stereo, Separate Ways, providing a fitting soundtrack to their chance encounter. "I'm Henry," he said, smoothly pulling back onto the empty highway. "And before you say anything, yes, that Henry, but out here, I'm just a guy driving through Nebraska." Alice nodded, fighting the urge to stare at his profile. In person, he looked younger than in his movies, more real somehow. "And I'm Alice," she replied simply, deciding not to mention that she'd seen his latest film 3 times at the local drive-in. "So what's your story, Alice? Not many people out hitchhiking along this stretch." She turned to look out the window, watching the endless cornfields roll by. "It's complicated," she answered, her voice catching slightly. If he only knew the real reason she was out here, the secret she carried that would change everything. The Corvette ate up the miles as the sky deepened to purple, and streetlights began to twinkle in the distance. Neither of them could have guessed how this chance encounter would alter both their lives forever, or that the simple truth Alice carried would soon bring one of Hollywood's biggest stars to his knees. Henry glanced at his mysterious passenger, noting how she seemed to carry herself with a quiet dignity despite her circumstances. There was something about her that intrigued him, a depth in her eyes that suggested she held secrets he couldn't begin to imagine. The neon signs of Grand Island began to appear on the horizon, and with them, the beginning of a story that would challenge everything Henry thought he knew about love, truth, and what really matters in life. The neon lights of the Starlight Diner cast a warm glow across the Corvette's hood as Henry pulled into the parking lot. Whitney Houston's How Will I Know drifted from the diner's open windows, mixing with the sounds of clinking plates and quiet conversation. "Let me buy you dinner," Henry said, noticing how Alice's eyes lingered on the diner's window display of fresh-baked pies. "You must be hungry after all that walking." Alice started to decline, but her stomach betrayed her with a quiet growl. "I don't want to impose." "Please," Henry insisted, already opening his door. "I could use the company. Gets lonely out here on the road." The bell above the door chimed as they entered. The waitress, her name tag reading Betty, did a double take at Henry before leading them to a quiet booth in the corner. Red vinyl seats squeaked as they settled in, and the laminated menus showed signs of years of use. "What brings a Hollywood star to Nebraska?" Alice asked, finally addressing the elephant in the room. She fidgeted with her paper napkin, carefully tearing it into tiny squares. Henry's expression softened. "Would you believe I'm running away?" At Alice's surprised look, he continued, "Not permanently, just needed a break. The studios, the cameras, the constant pressure. Sometimes it all becomes too much. So I told my agent I needed 2 weeks, got in my car, and started driving east." Betty returned with 2 cups of coffee, steam rising in lazy spirals. "Sinus ready to order, Hon." After they ordered, a classic burger for Henry, chicken fried steak for Alice, silence settled between them. The jukebox switched to Take On Me by Aha, and somewhere in the kitchen, a cook called out orders. "So," Henry ventured, stirring cream into his coffee, "what's your story? The real one, not the polite version." Alice's hands tightened around her coffee cup. What makes you think there's another version?" "Because nobody walks along Route 30 at sunset unless they're either running to something or from something, and you don't strike me as someone who runs away from things." The truth pressed against Alice's lips, begging to be spoken. But how could she tell him? How could she explain that her presence here, in this diner, in this town, would soon turn his world upside down? Their food arrived, momentarily saving her from responding. Betty set down plates piled high with classic American comfort food, the kind you could only find in small-town diners that hadn't changed their menu since the Eisenhower administration. "I'm looking for someone," Alice finally said, pushing her peas around with her fork. "Someone important. Family." "You could say that." She took a deep breath, then changed the subject. "Tell me about Hollywood. What's it really like?" Henry accepted the deflection, launching into stories about his latest film, a coming-of-age drama about a small-town kid who dreams of becoming a musician. As he spoke, Alice noticed how his entire demeanor changed when discussing his craft. His eyes lit up, his hands gesturing animatedly. "But enough about me," he said, pushing his empty plate aside. "Where are you staying tonight?" Alice's silence answered for her. "Listen, there's a decent motel just down the street, the Pine Ridge. Let me get you a room for the night. It's not safe for you to be out here alone." "I can't accept that," Alice protested, but Henry was already pulling out his wallet. "Consider it karma. Maybe someday you'll help someone else who needs it." The motel's vacancy sign buzzed and flickered as they pulled into the parking lot. Wood paneling and dated decor screamed 1980s charm, but it was clean and safe. Henry handled the check-in while Alice waited in the car, watching moths dance around the outdoor lights. Walking her to her room, Henry hesitated at the door. "Listen, I'm staying in town for a few days. If you need anything." He pulled out a business card and scribbled the motel's number on the back. "Call me. Any time." Alice took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you, Henry, for everything." After he left, Alice sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to cry. The weight of her secret, of what tomorrow would bring, pressed down on her like a physical thing. She pulled a wrinkled photograph from her bag. A younger Henry stood smiling next to a woman with kind eyes and flowing dark hair. The inscription on the back read, "Henry and Laura, Spring Formal." Alice traced the woman's face with trembling fingers. "I found him, Mom," she whispered to the empty room. "I found him." Across town, Henry lay awake in his own motel room, thinking about the mysterious girl he'd picked up on the highway. There was something about her that tugged at his memory, something in the shape of her eyes or the curve of her smile that seemed hauntingly familiar. But that was impossible. He'd never met her before today. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Alice stood outside the local diner, watching Henry's Corvette pull into the parking lot. He'd agreed to meet her for breakfast, not knowing that this meal would change his life forever. Her hand clutched the envelope in her pocket. Inside were the documents that would prove everything. Letters, photographs, and one birth certificate that would shatter the carefully constructed world of Hollywood's golden boy. The bell chimed as Henry walked in, spotting her immediately. He smiled. That same charming smile that had graced 1,000 magazine covers, and Alice's heart ached for what she was about to do to him. "Morning," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Sleep okay?" Alice nodded, her throat tight. From the kitchen, Madonna's Papa Don't Preach played on the radio, an ironic soundtrack for what was about to unfold. "Henry," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I need to tell you, about why I'm really here." Out of her bag, she pulled the envelope, placing it on the table between them like a bridge, or perhaps a bomb. The weight of years of secrets, of searching, of hope and fear, all contained in one manila envelope. Henry's smile faltered as he saw the seriousness in her expression. "Alice? What's going on?" The diner's sounds faded away, the clinking plates, the murmured conversations, the sizzling grill, until all Alice could hear was her own heartbeat and the words she was about to speak, words that would forever alter both their lives. The truth was about to come out, and there would be no going back. The envelope sat between them like a ticking time bomb. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past the diner window, momentarily blocking the morning sun. The shadows danced across Henry's face as he reached for the envelope with hesitant fingers. "Before you open that," Alice said, her voice barely steady, "I want you to know, I didn't come here to hurt you or cause trouble. I needed to know the truth, and I thought you deserved to know too." Henry's hand paused above the envelope. Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time played softly in the background, the familiar melody a stark contrast to the tension hanging between them. Betty approached with a coffee pot, but seeing their expressions, quietly retreated. With careful movements, Henry opened the envelope and began pulling out its contents. First came the photographs, moments frozen in time from years ago. His younger self smiled back at him, arm wrapped around Laura's waist at their high school spring formal. More photos followed. Laura at the county fair, Laura laughing by a Christmas tree, Laura standing in front of their old apartment building. "I don't understand," Henry said, his voice rough. "These are private photos. How did you get these?" "Keep going," Alice whispered. The next item was a letter, the paper yellowed with age. Henry recognized Laura's handwriting immediately. He'd spent countless nights reading and rereading her letters after she'd disappeared from his life without explanation. But this wasn't one he'd seen before. His eyes scanned the words, widening as he reached the middle of the page. The letter slipped from his trembling fingers, landing softly on the formica table between them. "No," he breathed. "This can't be." Alice pulled out one final document, a birth certificate. She placed it gently in front of Henry, watching as his eyes fixed on the details. Her name, her date of birth, her mother's name, Laura Mitchell. And there, under father's name, was written, Henry Morrison. The diner seemed to spin around them as Henry stared at the document, his coffee growing cold and forgotten. "Laura was pregnant," he whispered, more to himself than to Alice. "She never told me. She just disappeared." "She was scared," Alice explained, her voice gentle. "You were just starting your career in Hollywood. She didn't want to hold you back. She thought she was doing the right thing." Henry's hand came up to cover his mouth, his eyes never leaving the birth certificate. "All this time, I have a daughter." His voice cracked on the last word, and Alice saw tears beginning to form in his eyes. "Mom never stopped loving you," Alice continued, pulling out more letters from the envelope. "She kept every magazine article about you, every movie review. She made sure I knew who you were, what you'd accomplished. But she made me promise not to look for you until—" She trailed off, but Henry's head snapped up, suddenly alert. "Until what? Where is Laura now? Why isn't she here with you?" The pain in Alice's eyes told him everything before she could speak. "Mum got sick last winter. Before she left us, she told me everything. About how you met, how young and in love you were, how hard it was for her to leave. She gave me these letters and made me promise to find you." Henry pushed back from the table abruptly, standing up. His legs seemed unsteady. I need some air." Alice watched through the window as he paced in the parking lot, running his hands through his hair, occasionally stopping to stare at nothing. The morning sun caught the tears on his cheeks. Inside the diner, curious patrons tried to pretend they weren't watching the drama unfold. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Henry returned to the booth. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. "Tell me everything, please. I need to know about your life, about Laura, about everything I missed." And so Alice began to talk. She told him about growing up in a small town in Minnesota, about how hard Laura worked to give her a good life. She told him about school plays and softball games, about skinned knees and bedtime stories. With each word, she watched Henry's expression shift between joy at learning about his daughter's life and devastating grief at having missed it all. "She named you Alice," he said suddenly, a sad smile touching his lips. "After my grandmother." Alice nodded. "Mom said you used to tell her stories about spending summers at your grandmother's farm. She said it was where you learned to love acting, putting on shows in the barn for the family." "I did," Henry whispered. "I can't believe she remembered that." Their conversation was interrupted by Betty, who had been hovering nearby with poorly concealed concern. "Side, can I get you folks anything else?" Henry looked down, seeming to realize for the first time that their breakfast sat untouched in front of them. "Could we get this to go, please? And—" he glanced at Alice. "Maybe we could continue this conversation somewhere more private." They ended up in the park across the street, sitting on a bench beneath an old oak tree. A group of kids played nearby on a playground, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. Henry watched them, perhaps imagining a little girl with Alice's features among them, in a time he could never get back. "I would have been there," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "If I had known, I would have done everything differently. You have to believe that." "Mom knew that too," Alice assured him. "That's why she stayed away. She said you had such big dreams, such an amazing future ahead of you. She didn't want to be the reason you gave it all up." Henry laughed bitterly. "Give it up? Alice, none of it, not the movies, not the fame, not any of it, would have mattered more than being your father." He turned to look at her properly, studying her features. "You have her smile, you know, but those eyes, those are mine." Alice felt tears welling up in her own eyes. Mom used to say the same thing. Henry reached out hesitantly, then pulled back. "Guy, would it be okay if I hugged you?" Instead of answering, Alice leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him. The embrace was awkward at first, then melted into something natural and right, as though their hearts recognized what their minds were still struggling to process. When they pulled apart, Henry wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I have a daughter," he said again, this time with wonder rather than shock. "I have so much to learn about you, so much time to make up for. Will you let me try?" "That's why I'm here," Alice said softly. "Mom's last wish was for us to find each other. She wanted us to have a chance to be a family." "Family," Henry repeated, as if testing the word. He looked at Alice with new eyes, not as the mysterious hitchhiker from yesterday, but as the daughter he never knew he had, the daughter who had his eyes and Laura's smile, who carried both their histories in her DNA. A rental car drove by, its radio blasting Bon Jovi's "Livin' on a Prayer." The familiar song seemed to break the spell of the moment, bringing them back to the present reality. "What happens now?" Alice asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know this is a lot to process, and you have your life in Hollywood." Henry shook his head firmly. "Hollywood can wait. Right now, nothing is more important than this, than you. We have years to catch up on, and I don't want to miss another moment." As they sat there on the park bench, surrounded by the sounds of small-town life, both felt the weight of their shared history and the possibility of their future. The truth was out now, and while it had indeed brought Henry to his knees, it had also given him something he never knew he was missing: a daughter, a connection to Laura, a chance at a different kind of happiness than any Hollywood success could provide. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting their shadows long across the grass as father and daughter began the delicate process of getting to know each other, one story at a time. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Henry's motel room as he sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by photographs and letters. Each item told a piece of the story he'd missed: Alice's first steps, school achievements, holidays, and countless ordinary moments that should have been anything but ordinary. A small TV in the corner played MTV on mute, music videos flashing silently as Henry picked up another photograph. This one showed Laura holding a young Alice at what appeared to be a county fair, cotton candy in hand, both smiling broadly at the camera. His throat tightened as he noticed how Laura's smile hadn't changed from his memories of her. A knock at the door startled him from his reverie. Alice stood there, holding 2 takeout bags from the local burger joint. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, somewhat shyly. "And maybe we could talk more." Henry quickly cleared space on the small motel table, pushing aside scattered papers and photos. The familiar aroma of burgers and fries filled the room as Alice unpacked the food. A cassette player on the bedside table softly played REO Speedwagon's "Can't Fight This Feeling." "I keep thinking about your mother," Henry said, unwrapping his burger, "about all the signs I must have missed. She'd been acting different those last few weeks before she left, but I was so caught up in my first big break in Hollywood." Alice picked at her fries, choosing her words carefully. "Mom kept a diary. She wrote about those weeks, about how torn she was. She wanted to tell you, but then you got the call about that movie role. Midnight in Montana," Henry remembered. "My first leading role. I was so excited, so focused on proving myself." He set his burger down, appetite forgotten. "If I had known—" "Mom didn't want you to choose," Alice explained gently. "She said you were meant for greater things than being stuck in a small town with a baby on the way." "But that should have been my choice to make." Henry's voice rose slightly. Then he caught himself. "I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. Or even at Laura, really. I missed so much." Alice reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather journal. "Maybe this will help. Mom's diary. She wrote in it all through the years, keeping a record for you, just in case." She slid it across the table. Henry touched the cover reverently but didn't open it. "Tell me about her. What was she like as a mother?" A soft smile touched Alice's lips. "She was amazing. Worked 2 jobs sometimes to make sure I had everything I needed, but she never complained. She'd sing while making dinner, usually old Beatles songs. And every night, no matter how tired she was, she'd sit with me and ask about my day." "Did she—" Henry hesitated. "Did she ever marry? Was there someone else?" Alice shook her head. "There were a few dates over the years, but nothing serious. She used to say her heart was spoken for." She paused, then added softly, "She kept all your movies on VHS. We'd watch them together sometimes, and she'd tell me stories about the boy she fell in love with before he became a star." Henry ran a hand through his hair, emotion threatening to overwhelm him again. "I looked for her, you know, after she left. But she'd moved away, changed her number. Nobody knew where she'd gone. She moved us to Minnesota to stay with her aunt at first," Alice explained. "Later, we got our own place in a small town. Mom worked as a librarian." A memory struck Henry suddenly. "The library, that's where we first met. She was shelving books, and I was hiding from my algebra teacher." A bittersweet smile crossed his face. "She recommended To Kill a Mockingbird, said it would change my life. It was her favorite book," Alice said. "She read it to me when I was young." The conversation paused as a group of loud teenagers passed by the motel room, their laughter and chatter accompanied by the tinny sound of a portable radio playing Walking on Sunshine. The interruption seemed to remind them both of the world beyond their bubble of shared memories and revelations. "I should call my agent," Henry said suddenly. "I need to extend my break. There's a movie I'm supposed to start filming next month, but—" "No," Alice interjected quickly. "You can't put your career on hold because of me. Mom would hate that." "Alice, you're my daughter. Nothing is more important than getting to know you." "And we will," she assured him. "But not at the cost of everything you've built. Mom sacrificed so much to make sure you could follow your dreams. Don't let that be for nothing." Henry studied her face. So young, yet carrying wisdom beyond her years. "You're very much like her, you know, always thinking of others first." As the afternoon wore on, they continued talking, sharing stories and memories. Henry learned about Alice's love for photography, inherited from Laura, who had always carried a camera. Alice heard about Henry's early days in Hollywood, sleeping on friends' couches and working as a waiter between auditions. "I have something for you," Alice said eventually. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a small box, wrapped in simple brown paper. "Mom wanted you to have this. She wrapped it herself before—" Henry carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small wooden box, and within it, a silver pocket watch. His breath caught. He recognized it immediately. "My grandfather's watch," he whispered. "I gave it to Laura the night of the spring formal, said it was a promise that we'd always have time for each other." His voice cracked. "I can't believe she kept it all these years." "She wound it every Sunday," Alice said softly. "Said it was her way of keeping time with you, even when you were apart." Henry opened the watch. It still ticked steadily, marking time as it had for decades. On the inside of the lid, he noticed something new. A tiny photograph had been carefully attached. It showed Laura holding a newborn Alice. "She had that added right after I was born," Alice explained. "Said that way time would always flow between all three of us." The gesture, so thoughtful and so perfectly Laura, brought fresh tears to Henry's eyes. He clasped the watch tightly, feeling its steady rhythm against his palm, like a heartbeat connecting past to present. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of cars on the highway and the soft whir of the room's air conditioning. Outside, the sky had begun to take on the purple hues of early evening. "Would you—" Henry started, then hesitated. "Would you tell me about her last days? About how she—" Alice nodded, understanding his need to know. "She wasn't in pain at the end. The doctors made sure of that. She spent her last weeks putting together that envelope for you, writing letters, organizing photos. She wanted you to have the whole story." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The night before she left us, she made me promise two things. First, that I would find you and give you everything she'd prepared. And second," Alice smiled through tears, "that I wouldn't let you blame yourself for any of it. She said her life had been filled with love, love for you, love for me, and no regrets." Henry stood abruptly, walking to the window. The parking lot below was bathed in the golden light of sunset, transforming the ordinary scene into something almost magical. In the distance, the neon signs of local businesses began to flicker to life. "I didn't just lose Laura back then," he said finally, still facing the window. "I lost you too, both of you, all those years, all those moments." He turned back to face Alice. "I want to be part of your life now, if you'll let me. I know I can't make up for lost time, but maybe we can make new memories." Alice stood and walked over to join him at the window. Together, they watched as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Mom used to say that it's never too late for love. That time doesn't matter when hearts are involved." Henry put an arm around her shoulders, and this time the embrace felt natural, as if their hearts remembered a connection their minds were just beginning to understand. As night fell over the small Nebraska town, father and daughter stood together, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Each star seemed to represent a possibility, a moment, a chance to build something new from the fragments of what was lost. The pocket watch ticked steadily in Henry's hand, marking the beginning of their new chapter together. The morning paper lay unopened on the diner table between Henry and Alice, the headline already causing complications in their newly formed relationship. "Hollywood heartthrob spotted in Nebraska, mystery girl in tow." The grainy photograph showed them sitting on the park bench, though thankfully it was too blurry to make out Alice's features clearly. Henry pushed the paper aside, his coffee untouched. "I'm so sorry about this. I should have known someone would recognize me." "It's okay," Alice said, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "We knew this would happen eventually." The diner's jukebox played Foreigner's "I Want to Know What Love Is" softly in the background as Betty approached with fresh coffee. She'd grown protective of them over the past few days, shooing away curious onlookers who tried to snap photos through the window. "More reporters outside," Betty warned, topping off their cups. "Back door's clear if you need it." Henry ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "My agent's been calling non-stop. The studio's getting nervous about the delay in filming. They want me back in California by next week." Alice stirred her coffee absently, watching the cream create patterns in the dark liquid. "So maybe it's time we talked about what happens next." Before Henry could respond, the diner's door chimed. A woman in an expensive suit walked in, her heels clicking purposefully on the linoleum floor. Recognition flashed across Henry's face, followed quickly by resignation. "Margaret," he said as she reached their table, "I should have known they'd send you." "Henry, darling," Margaret replied, her smile professional but warm. "How you've caused quite a stir." She turned to Alice, assessing her with kind but calculating eyes. "And this must be—" "My daughter," Henry said firmly. "Alice, this is Margaret, my publicist." Margaret's composed expression flickered only slightly at the word daughter. She pulled up a chair, uninvited. "Well, this certainly explains a few things. How long have you known?" "A few days," Henry answered. "And before you start planning how to spin this, you should know I'm not interested in hiding it." "Henry," Margaret's voice took on a gentle but firm tone, "you have a major film about to start production. Your image as Hollywood's most eligible bachelor helps sell tickets. We need to handle this carefully." Alice started to stand. "Maybe I should give you two some privacy." "No," Henry caught her hand. "Stay. Whatever we decide together." Margaret watched this interaction with interest. "The studio will want verification, of course. DNA tests, background checks." "Absolutely not." Henry's voice was steel. "I don't need a test to know she's my daughter. Look at her, she has my eyes, Laura's smile." "Laura?" Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Your high school sweetheart, the one who disappeared." She turned to Alice with new understanding. "Of course. I see it now." The diner had grown quiet, other patrons trying to pretend they weren't listening to every word. On the jukebox, Bruce Springsteen sang about glory days gone by. "Here's what's going to happen," Henry said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm going to finish filming this movie. I owe the studio and my co-stars that much. But I'm doing it on my terms. No hiding Alice, no spinning stories. She's my daughter, and I'm proud of that fact." Margaret pulled out a small notebook. "We could release a statement. Something about recently discovering your daughter, emphasizing family values." "No statements," Alice interjected quietly. "Please. Mom never wanted any of this. She just wanted us to know each other." Henry squeezed her hand. "She's right. This isn't about publicity or image. This is about family." Margaret sighed, but there was respect in her eyes. "You know the press will dig. They'll find out about Laura, about the past." "Let them," Henry said. "I'm not ashamed of loving Laura, or of having a daughter. The only shame is in all the years I missed." Just then, a camera flash went off outside the diner window. Henry instinctively moved to shield Alice from view, but she stopped him. "We can't hide forever," she said softly. "Toys, Sam, and I don't want you to risk your career. Mom would never forgive me." Margaret watched this exchange thoughtfully. Perhaps we're approaching this wrong. Henry, your new film, it's about family, about second chances. What if we don't fight the story, but we don't sell it either? We simply let you be a father getting to know his daughter." "No interviews?" Henry asked. "No arranged interviews," Margaret agreed. "Just live your life. Let people see the truth. A father and daughter finding each other. It's a beautiful story, one that doesn't need any Hollywood embellishment." Alice looked at the reporters gathering outside. "What about my privacy, my life back home?" "We'll protect you as much as we can," Margaret assured her. "But yes, your life will change. Are you ready for that?" Alice pulled out her mother's diary, running her fingers over the worn cover. Mom wrote that sometimes love requires courage, that nothing worth having comes without risk. Henry smiled, recognizing Laura's wisdom in their daughter's words. "So we face it together." "Together," Alice agreed. Margaret closed her notebook. "I'll have my team start preparing contingency plans. But Henry," she fixed him with a serious look, "the studio still needs you in California next week." The unspoken question hung in the air. What would happen to this fragile new relationship when real life intervened? How would father and daughter navigate their connection across thousands of miles? Henry looked at Alice, seeing both his own determination and Laura's gentle strength in her face. "We'll figure it out, one day at a time." As Margaret left to make calls, Henry and Alice remained in their booth, the morning sun streaming through the windows, casting a warm glow over their shared coffee cups and uncertain future. "You could come with me," Henry said suddenly. "To California. Just for a while, see what it's like." Alice shook her head. "I have my life back home. My job at the bookstore, my friends, Mom's house to take care of. She paused. But maybe I could visit? During breaks? I'd like that, Henry smiled. And I could come to Minnesota when I'm not filming. See where you grew up. Visit... His voice caught slightly. Visit Laura. Outside, more reporters had gathered, their cameras ready. But inside the diner, in their small corner booth, father and daughter continued planning their future, one careful step at a time. The jukebox played on Fee, now spinning Simple Minds' Don't You Forget About Me, its lyrics about remembrance and connection feeling particularly poignant. The pocket watch sat between them on the table, still keeping time, still connecting past to present to future. Its steady ticking seemed to whisper Laura's words. Sometimes love requires courage. They had found each other. Now they just had to figure out how to stay connected, how to build a relationship across miles and different worlds, how to be family in their own unique way. The morning stretched ahead of them, full of both challenges and possibilities, as they began to write the next chapter of their story together. Part 6. The California sun blazed overhead as Alice stepped out of the airport terminal, clutching her small suitcase. Henry waited by his Corvette, drawing curious glances from passers-by. It had been 2 months since their first meeting in Nebraska, and while phone calls had kept them connected, this was different. This was Hollywood. "Welcome to my world," Henry said, hugging her before taking her bag. The radio played Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror as they drove through Los Angeles, the city sprawling endlessly around them. Alice pressed her face against the window, taking in the palm trees and bright billboards. One of them displayed Henry's face, promoting his upcoming film. "It's so strange," she said, "seeing you everywhere like this." "Try living it," Henry smiled, but there was understanding in his voice. "How's the house coming along?" Alice had spent the past month sorting through Laura's house in Minnesota, each room filled with memories and discoveries. "Almost finished. I found more photos yesterday. You'll want to see them." They pulled up to Henry's house in the Hollywood Hills, a modern structure of glass and clean lines. Nothing like the cozy craftsman home she'd grown up in, but somehow it suited him. "Your room's this way," Henry said, leading her inside. "I wasn't sure how to decorate it, so—" He opened the door to reveal walls covered in framed photographs, dozens of them, carefully arranged. Alice recognized them as copies of the pictures she'd shown him in Nebraska, their shared history, displayed with love and pride. "Is it too much?" Henry asked, suddenly uncertain. "I can take them down." Alice hugged him, tears threatening. "It's perfect." The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Henry took her to his film set, where she watched him work, fascinated by the contrast between the glamorous actor on camera and the father who brought her coffee between takes. The crew treated her with a mix of curiosity and respect, though she overheard whispered conversations about the secret daughter story that had captivated the tabloids. One evening, as they sat by Henry's pool watching the sun set over the city, Alice pulled out Laura's diary. "I found a new entry I thought you'd want to hear." Henry set down his glass, giving her his full attention. She read, "My dearest Henry, today our daughter asked about you again. I showed her your latest film, and she said your eyes crinkle just like hers when you smile. She's so much like you, not just in looks but in spirit. That same determination, that same gentle heart beneath a brave face. I hope someday you'll see it too." Henry wiped his eyes. "So she saw me so clearly, even after all those years." "She never stopped loving you," Alice said softly, "just like she knew you never really stopped loving her." The next morning, a Sunday, Henry surprised Alice by suggesting they skip his scheduled publicity event. Instead, they drove to a small diner that reminded them both of Betty's place back in Nebraska. Over pancakes and coffee, they talked about Laura, about the future, about finding their way as father and daughter. "I've been thinking," Henry said, carefully cutting his pancakes. "What if I took some time off after this film? Really took time off, not just a few days. We could go back to Minnesota together, properly go through Laura's house. Maybe you could show me all the places that mattered to you both." Alice's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about your career?" "My career will wait. I've missed enough time with you already. Part 7. Autumn painted the Minnesota trees in brilliant colors as Henry and Alice stood before Laura's grave. The small cemetery was peaceful, birds singing in the nearby trees. Henry knelt to place a bouquet of daisies, Laura's favorites, against the headstone. I brought her flowers on our first date, he told Alice. Daisies, because that's all I could afford. She said they were perfect because they were honest flowers, no pretense about them. Alice smiled, remembering her mother's fondness for the simple blooms. She kept a vase of them on the kitchen window all summer long. They had spent the past week going through Laura's house together, each room holding memories that needed to be sorted, preserved, or finally let go. In the attic, they found a box of Henry's old letters, tied with a faded ribbon. In the kitchen, Laura's collection of playbills from every production Henry had ever performed in, dating back to high school. She really did follow my whole career, Henry had said, touching the worn papers gently. Now, standing in the crisp autumn air, father and daughter found themselves at a turning point. The house was sold, its contents either packed away or donated. Alice had given notice at the bookstore. Change was coming, ready or not. "Dice, what do you think she'd say?" Alice asked, watching leaves dance across the cemetery grass. "About us, sir, about everything." Henry smiled, remembering Laura's laugh, her wisdom, her unfailing ability to see the best in every situation. "I think she'd say we were right on time, that everything happens when it's supposed to." A familiar tune drifted from a passing car, Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time, and they both laughed at the coincidence. That evening, their last in Minnesota, they sat on the porch of Laura's house one final time. The pocket watch rested between them, still keeping perfect time. "I've been offered a role in a new film," Henry said quietly. "Shot mostly in Chicago. That's a lot closer to Minnesota than Los Angeles." Alice understood what he wasn't saying. "You want to split your time between there and here? If you're willing, we could find a place together, somewhere in between, somewhere that could be ours." "What about Hollywood? Hollywood will always be there. But this, us, family, this matters more." As the sun set on their last day in Minnesota, Alice thought about Laura's final diary entry, the one she hadn't shared with Henry yet. She pulled out the worn book and read, "My greatest wish is not that they find each other, though that is part of it. My wish is that they understand what I've always known, that love doesn't follow time's rules, that family isn't about the years you had, but the moments you choose to create together, that it's never too late for hearts to find their way home." Henry listened, tears falling freely now. She always did have a way with words. "She believed in us," Alice said softly, "even before we knew to believe in ourselves." The next morning, as they prepared to leave, a young couple walked past the house, holding hands. The girl carried a small bunch of daisies, and her laughter reminded them both so much of Laura that they had to smile. Life would go on. Hollywood would adjust to Henry Morrison, the actor who chose family over spotlight. Alice would build a new life that bridged two worlds, and somewhere, they both felt, Laura was watching, her heart full of the love that had finally found its way home. As they drove away from the house one last time, the pocket watch ticked steadily in Alice's lap, marking not the time they'd lost, but the moments they would create together. On the radio, Bruce Springsteen sang about glory days, but Henry and Alice knew their best days weren't behind them. They were still to come. The story that began with a chance encounter on a Nebraska highway had become something more, a testament to love's patience, to family's persistence, and to the truth that it's never too late for hearts to find their way back to where they belong. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family, and don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.